Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the next video in my series of March of the Machine Commander deck techs. I'm covering every legendary creature from the March of the Machine main set in no particular order, plus the extra legends from Mom Jumpstart, the special pre-release promos, and if there's interest, maybe even the non-face legends from the Mom Commander product. So if you have a request for a commander you'd like to see me build, or a way you want to see me build them, let me know in the comments below. As you see, today our commander is Borborygmos and Fblthp, respectively the de facto guildmaster of the Gruul, and a little friend who's famous among fans for his poor sense of direction. During the Phyrexian invasion of Ravnica, this pair teamed up on the front lines, with Fblthp serving as a spotter for Borborygmos and watching his six. What they lack in individual depth perception, they make up for in combined damage output. A little like how the Gretzky brothers hold the NHL record for the most points scored by a set of brothers, 4 for Brent and 2,857 for Wayne. Before we get into the deck tech, let's go over my deck building template. I like to build my decks around the commander. I want to show off why they're so cool and why I put them in the command zone, so whatever they lead me to do, that's what I'm doing as my game plan. I put about 30 cards toward doing that. 30 more cards go towards supporting that game plan in the form of card advantage, acceleration, and interaction pieces. I usually run at least 1 or 2 Wraths, sometimes more, but sometimes none if that is the better way for the game to go, or the deck to go rather. And then I usually keep to a floor of 38 lands so that I can cast my spells and, hit my land drops. This deck is actually running 40 lands with 1 more MDFC land. So let's talk about our commander. Borborygmos and Fblthp is a 6/5 legendary Cyclops homunculus for 2 and Teamer, a green, a blue, and a red, that has the first ability. Whenever it enters or attacks, we draw a card, and then we can discard any number of land cards. And when we discard 1 or more land cards this way, Borborygmos and Fblthp will deal twice as much damage as the number of cards we discarded to a target creature. Notice it doesn't say target creature your opponents control. It could deal damage to our own creatures or to itself if we want it to, which maybe we will. And also, for 1 and a blue, we can put Borborygmos and Fblthp into our library third from the top. There is not usually a good reason for us to do that, but we do have 1 card in this deck that may make that a way for us to cheat the commander tax, and it's a good way to just put it into the command zone, because when we would move it into a hidden zone like our library, we can choose instead to have it go to the command zone, and so maybe we protect it that way. So on the surface, these two characters aren't much alike. Borborygmos is a massive Cyclops, purported to be 10 stories tall, a rage-filled warrior who the Gruul clans follow like a leader, while Fblthp is a shin-height homunculus, a fearful and cringing servant to the Azorius with little usefulness and less authority. But they both only have 1 eye, proving that sometimes a single commonality is all it takes to make a good team. To represent our commander's complementary but single-sided goals, we have a split game plan for this deck. Borborygmos wants us to smash whole blocks of buildings and bridges, tearing through the cityscape as he barrels into our opponents. We might win with commander damage, but that's almost incidental in the face of the sheer quantity of damage we're doing. And every time he swings his club, flattening blockers and bystanders alike, we find ways to refill our hand from both our library and graveyard to keep our hulked out commander's anger flowing. And with a collection of cards to redirect our damage, multiply it, and send it to our opponent's faces, no one will forget that Borborygmos is enraged. But that's only our pithy Plan A, and Fblthp is whispering in our ear the whole time we're crushing our opponent's creatures to remind us that lands have other uses too. We can dig them out of our deck and bring them back from the battlefield, sure, but what if we're strategic about it? What if we get a little lost in all the locations we're able to visit, fixing our mana, but also drawing ourselves a map of the territory we're terrorizing? Every door leads to another china shop for us to demolish, and with as universally beloved as Fblthp is, gathering up gates is the only gatekeeping he wants to do. It doesn't matter that we lose our way if we find the maze's end eventually. Best of all, there's so much overlap between our 2 game plans. Finding lands for Fblthp feeds fodder to Borborygmos, clearing a path for his assault, and drawing cards from our attack trigger gets us synergy pieces to empower our landfall and move us 1 step closer to our alternate victory condition. We can even bounce our commander back to the command zone with their second ability, avoiding all the ways our opponents might try to lock us down or stop us from demolishing their boards and their life totals. Our forked strategy is farsighted, forging a path through the city streets that leads us to victory. Our opponents can't predict our moves if they're following our footsteps only one at a time. We may be monocular, but they can only be myopic, unable to anticipate the way we'll choose to beat them. In the end, they'll only be able to watch helplessly as we crash into them, casting about to find all the gates closed and all the exits blocked, forced to meet our gaze as we tap out for the win. If only they could have seen things our way. You'll enjoy this deck if you like feeling a little sneaky as your big smashy commander pulls out a combo win, or if you know that the only thing better than hitting your land drops is hitting your opponent with them. So as usual, this Moxfield list will be linked in the video's description, should be right now, of course, when you're watching this. At the bottom of it, there is a considering section with a bunch of cards that I chose not to include, but you certainly could, some of which I didn't include just because they're outside the budget for the decks that I typically build. So if your budget's a little bigger, or maybe your collection has these cards already in it, feel free to include those. Alternatively, if you want to go into a little bit of a smaller budget or a different direction with more focus on one of these game plans, you should be able to get a good start with the cards in that considering section. So we're going to start with what I have tagged as land tutors. These are cards that, at their simplest, just put lands in our hand. We want to be able to get cards out of our library that are land cards so that we can discard them to our attack trigger on our commander to hit our opponent's creatures, because every land card we throw away is a shock. It's 2 damage to whichever creature we are targeting with it. So we're going to start with, it's just a variant, and it's my favorite variant for Lay of the Land. It's Bushwhack. 1 green gives you a sorcery that says we can either search for a basic land, reveal it, put it in our hand, and shuffle. This is called Lay of the Land. Or we can have target creature we control fight a creature we don't control, which means they deal their power to one another. So you can either get a bush or you can whack something. I love Bushwhack. This is just a solid thing. And with our commander being pretty big, a 6/5, this kills a lot of creatures that are, powerful for reasons other than their stats. But usually we're looking to put lands into our hand so that we can just turn them into a shock later on, or more than a shock, if we have multiple lands, of course. Another one of our Lay of the Lands is Open the Gates. A single green for a sorcery. It's just Lay of the Land, but it can also find gates. It hits a basic land or a gate card. So any gate we want, we can put it into our hand. We're usually going to use this to find our gates. And yeah, we'll be able to play them right away or discard it to the Borborygmos and Fblthp trigger. Gatekeeper Vine from Return to Ravnica. Love to see this friend. 1 and a green for an 0/2 plant wall. It doesn't have the wall type anymore, but it has defender. So when this creature enters, you may search your library for a basic land or gate, reveal it, put it in your hand, and shuffle. Gatekeeper Vine is just Open the Gates, but for 1 extra generic mana, and it comes with an 0/2 defender. So that's not nothing. Nylea's Intervention from Theros Beyond Death is X and double green for a sorcery that lets us choose to either search our library for up to X land cards, reveal them, put in our hand, and shuffle, or do twice X damage to each creature with flying. So I like that it's twice X damage because it kind of mirrors Borborygmos and Fblthp's ability to do twice X damage if X is the number of land cards we've discarded. But really, this is here to search us up some land cards. I also want to make mention that these last 3 cards have all said basic land on them, although Open the Gates and Gatekeeper Vine say or gate. Nylea's Invention says just land cards, doesn't say basic. We can find our command tower with this. We can find whatever we're looking for. Maybe you've upgraded this deck. Spoilers, I don't have any shock lands in it, but you could certainly find some with Nylea's Invention if you put them in here. So this is a great way for us to just say green and X, or double green and X is the amount of lands we want to find, and twice X is the amount of damage we want to do to some creature because we're about to attack with our commander and throw all these lands away. Next is Cultivate with Mystical Archive art. Love it. Cultivate is great. 2 and a green for a sorcery that lets you search your library for up to 2 basic lands. These are basics again. We reveal them. 1 goes on the battlefield tapped, and the other goes in our hand, and then we shuffle. So it's a combination of rampant growth, so 1 and a green, find a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and Lay of the Land. A single green, find a basic, put it in your hand. Except that it's not 1 green green, it's 2 and a green. So Cultivate's excellent for us because not only does it ramp us by putting one of our basics into play, it also puts a basic in our hand, which we can throw away to our commander's triggered ability. I want to just mention Kodama's Reach as well. Kodama's Reach is exactly Cultivate. It's the same card, except that it is an arcane sorcery instead of just a regular sorcery. This arcane typing does not apply at all in our deck, so we can completely ignore it, so it's like we have 2 copies of Cultivate. Or if you want to say it, we have 2 copies of Kodama's Reach. District Guide is next. It is very similar to the Gatecreeper Divine in that it is 2 and a green for an Elf Scout. It's a 2/2 that says when it enters, we can search our library for a basic land or gate, reveal it, put it in our hand, and shuffle. So this is, again, just open the gates. But for 2 generic mana, it comes with a 2/2 body, as opposed to 1 generic mana and it comes with an 0/2 defender. Next is Sprouting Vines. This is so good in our deck. 2 and a green for an instant that lets us search our library for a basic, reveal it, put it in our hand, and shuffle. So just Lay of the Land. But it also has Storm, which means when we cast it, which we can do at instant speed, for every spell that has been cast this turn by us or by anyone, we total up the number of spells cast by everyone this turn, and then Sprouting Vines makes a copy for each of those, a copy of itself on the stack. So essentially, this is for 2 and a green, however many spells were cast this turn already, plus 1, since Sprouting Vines itself, is the number of basic lands we're going to be able to put into our hand. Hopefully, we're doing this on our turn. We've cast a couple of spells. Get maybe 3 lands out of this. So a nice, 3 basics for 3 mana. But we can certainly do this on our opponent's turns, just to fill up our hand with lands for the next turn, so we can throw them all away and go after one of our opponent's creatures. Next is Explore the Underdark. For 4 and a green, we get a sorcery that says search your library for up to 2 basic land cards and or gates, put them on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. So this is an explosive vegetation, where you search your library. It's a double rampant growth in that way. Search your library for 2 basics, put them on the battlefield tapped, shuffle. Pretty good. But this is... you can hit gates as well. There is a card called Circuitous Route, which gives us this exact effect right here for a single mana cheaper. Circuitous Route is in the considering section. I didn't choose it because for 1 more mana, we get to take the initiative. Now, what is the initiative? The best way to show it to you is with the token for it. The initiative is a cool mechanic. Some people think it's a little much. I think it's fine, in Commander especially. What it means is, whenever you take the initiative, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you venture into the Undercity, which is a dungeon. I'll explain how this works. But it just essentially means if you play the card we're talking about, and then you get your 2 lands or gates, probably gates, you will immediately put this card on the table and put a little marker on the secret entrance for yourself. And the secret entrance is Lay of the Land. You go find an additional land card, or basic land, put it in your hand, and shuffle. So for 1 extra mana on top of Circuitous Route, we've gotten 2 gates into play and a basic into our hand. In addition, if nobody bothers us or does any combat damage to us until the next turn, because you take the initiative whenever you do combat damage to a player that has the initiative. So as long as we don't take any combat damage, we will continue to have the initiative. And at the beginning of our upkeep, we're going to get to move from the secret entrance to the Lost Well or the Forge and follow ourselves, getting these benefits every time we take the initiative or while having the initiative go to our upkeep until we complete it. At which point it's done. We don't have any other ways to continue to take the initiative, but we can sure get the Throne of the Dead 3, then take commander damage, or not commander, but combat damage from one of our opponents, and if we then do combat damage to them, we will take the initiative again, and we'll start back at the entrance, the secret entrance, and be able to lay of the land again. I won't read through all of the things that go on in the Undercity, but again, real simple. We get this, we get to start off in the first room. Every time we go to our upkeep while we have the initiative, or every time we do combat damage to someone else who has the initiative, that will cause us to take the initiative, and we get to go into or move through the Undercity. A pretty fun mechanic, even if it can be a little complicated, but it's easy to print this off and just have it at the table if you don't have the token with you yourself. So that's why I think Explore the Underdark is better in this deck than Circuitous Route, simply because we can afford the extra mana. We've had a lot of lands in this deck and a lot of ways to ramp, and taking the initiative gives us an extra lay of the land, which is more valuable to us than it is for most people. Next is Fiery Fall. Fiery Fall is really in this deck as a removal spell. It's 5 and a red for an instant that deals 5 damage to target creature, just kills something. But it also has basic land cycling for 1 and a red, which means while it's in our hand, we can pay 1 and a red and discard it to Lay of the Land. Search our library for a basic, put it in our hand, shuffle. So this is a good way for us to, alternatively, if we don't need it as the damage, we can use it to tutor a land into our hand. Finally, very strong in our deck, is Realm Seekers. 4 and double green. For an Elf Scout that is a 0/0 creature, but it enters with a number of 1/1 counters equal to the total number of cards in all players' hands. It is not uncommon, or not unthinkable rather, for us to get this out on turn 4 when everyone's got at least 4 or 5 cards in hand, probably. That's like a 16/16 on turn 4. And we don't even care about attacking with it. I mean, we will for sure, but it's here so that we can pay 2 and a green and remove a counter from it to Lay of the Land. So repeatable Lay of the Land that we can do over and over and over, putting more and more cards in our hand, even though it's not actually a Lay of the Land because it says a land card, not a basic land card. So we can find whatever lands we need, gates or otherwise, with Realm Seekers. Very nice. Next we have the Land Recursion section, which is right here. Land Recursion is about taking our land cards that are in the graveyard and getting them back somehow, usually to our hand, but otherwise just into play. Both of those are powerful for us. Life from the Loam is where we're starting. Life from the Loam seems like a very simple card, so why is it $7.50? Well, it's because of Dredge. Dredge is an extremely powerful mechanic, and we're going to talk it through. So Life from the Loam is 1 and a green for a sorcery that says return up to 3 target land cards from your graveyard to your hand. Great. If we've thrown away at least 3 cards to our commander's triggered ability, their attack ability, their attack trigger, I should say, then great, we can get them back. Then Life from the Loam resolves, it goes to the graveyard, and we're fine. Then we go to our next turn, or any other time we would draw a card, and Life from the Loam has Dredge 3, which means if we would draw a card, instead of drawing a card, we can mill 3 to quote-unquote draw Life from the Loam from our graveyard to our hand. So we replace our draw with putting Life from the Loam back in our hand, and it costs us milling 3 cards to do that. The reason this is great is because it puts land cards in our graveyard, among other things. We've got a lot of non-lands in our deck, but a lot of lands as well. And then we can immediately cast Life from the Loam to take 3 of the lands that we maybe milled, or maybe we had a bunch of lands in there that we couldn't have already put back in our hand for the first time. Like maybe we cast Life from the Loam when we have 6 lands in hand, or 6 lands in graveyard. Cast it, get 3 back. Next turn, when we would draw, we dredge Life from the Loam, putting maybe 2 more lands into our graveyard, and we cast Life from the Loam to get 3 more lands back up. So we can keep doing this as much as we want. It does have a little bit of diminishing returns eventually, but if we don't need those lands in hand right away, well, we can dredge it later. It's totally fine. Life from the Loam is just very strong in our deck, and it's going to continue to be whenever we need to clear the path for our commander's attack, because that's really what we're doing a lot of the time with our attack trigger. We're throwing lands away to kill the thing that would have blocked us. Next is Glacier Wood Siege from Tarkir Dragonstorm. I love the sieges. 1, a green, and a blue for an enchantment that says when it enters, you choose either Temur or Sultai. we're generally going to choose Sultai, even though this is a Teamer deck. Teamer is whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, target player mills 4 cards. That's not horrible. We have, a quantity of sorceries and instants in our deck, 19 of them. That's all right, and we could use that to mill ourselves and put lands in our graveyard if we wanted to, plus, whatever other cards we're milling. But really, we have this here to be our Crucible of Worlds. If we choose Sultai, we have the ability to play lands from our graveyard. Now that doesn't mean we can discard from our graveyard into our graveyard. We're not treating these lands like they're in our hand. But we can sure take the lands that we're discarding to our commander and then play them onto the battlefield as our land drop for the turn, or land drops if we have one of our couple of cards that gives us extra land drops. So this is a way for us to recur lands from our graveyard to the battlefield in the form of land drops. Glacierwood Siege as our Crucible is very nice. Next up is Slogurk, the Overslime. Gross. Slogurk actually does quite a lot for us in this deck, and if you can make heads or tails of this art, let me know in the comments below and you will get some internet points. For 1, a green and a blue, we have a 3/3 legendary Ooze with Trample. And it says, whenever a land is put into your graveyard from anywhere, put a +1/+1 counter on Slogurk. So all the times we're discarding cards to our commander, anytime we maybe would be milling, and we put lands in our graveyard, Slogurk gets bigger. And then when Slogurk has 3 counters on it, we can remove 3 of those counters to bounce it. Well, why would we want to do that? Well, because when we do, when it leaves the battlefield, whether it has died, whether it's been exiled, or whether we've bounced it, we can return up to 3 target land cards from our graveyard to our hand. So every time Slogurk leaves the battlefield, we get a Life from the Loam effect. 3 lands back from our graveyard to our hand, so we can use them again and again. So Slogurk is great for us to discard 3 lands while it's in play. It becomes a 6/6. Maybe it's attacking with our commander, and it does 6 damage. Then on our opponent's turn, we can bounce Slogurk by taking these 3 counters off of it and getting some lands back to our hand and do it all over again next turn. It is worth noticing that you could remove 3 counters when Slogurk has more than 3 counters on it, and then you've lost those counters. So I just want to mention this because if Slogurk were to have, let's say, 6 counters, it's a 9/9, let's say, you could activate this. I don't want you to think that you're able to say, all right, I activate this ability, and while it's on the stack, I activate it a second time so that I'll get 2 leaves the battlefield triggers. That's not the case. The first one of these that resolves, which of course will be the second one you activate, the second one you activate, will cause Slogurk to go back to your hand, which means he will leave the battlefield, or it will leave the battlefield and trigger this. And then the second ability that resolves won't be able to return Slogurk, so Slogurk won't leave the battlefield, so you won't get to Life from the Loam. So yeah, Slogurk is fun to keep sort of playing, building up, bouncing, Life from the Loam with it, play it again, keep doing it, but just don't think that you can get this abilities effect multiple times in the same turn, probably, unless of course you're just replaying Slogurk multiple times in that turn. Next up is Undergrowth Recon. This card is really good in this deck. It seems like it would be counter to our plan, but remember we have multiple plans going on. So Undergrowth Recon is 1 and double green for an enchantment that says at the beginning of your upkeep, return target land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So this is taking any of our lands that are in our graveyard, and we get to put one of them back on the battlefield tapped at the start of our upkeep. We are getting a little bit of ramp out of this. It is slow ramp, sure, but if we're not taking those cards and recurring them back to our hand, we might as well get those lands onto the battlefield so we can at least tap them for mana next turn. Or maybe even this turn. We have a couple of ways to replace this tapped effect and get those cards back into play right away. Especially if these cards are gates, that's really going to help us. And I know you've been watching this video for a little while and you don't know how the Maze's End combo works. Not that it's really a combo, the Maze's End card works. But don't worry, we will talk about that very soon. Next up, from Final Fantasy, is Zeldinkt. Let me know in the comments if I've said that right. I do not know Final Fantasy. So Zell is a 0/3 legendary human monk for 2 and a red that gives us the ability to play an extra land on each of our turns. So that's great. Zell also gets +1/+0 for every land we control, which is good because we sure would like Zell to be, to have a power of more than 0. But at the end of this turn, we bounce a land we control back to our hand. So at the beginning of our end step, we have to bounce one of our lands, which is fine. Sometimes we want to be able to play our lands. Sometimes we want to be able to discard our lands for our commander. Zell gives us the ability to do both without losing anything, because we haven't lost out on our land drop every turn because we have an extra land drop thanks to Zell. So, and then Zell becoming quite big is also very nice. Splendid Reclamation. So good. Splendid Rec is 3 and a green for a sorcery that says all the lands that are in your graveyard, put them on the battlefield tapped. Just all of them. So this can be incredible for us. If we have a Landfall trigger, which we have 3 cards that have Landfall, if we want to do something like, attack with Zell, maybe we've just put 7 lands back into play, and his power is enormous now. But in any case, if we are not trying to recur those cards to our hand, we can certainly put them on the battlefield, and now, even if it's next turn, we're going to have so much more mana to be able to do more good stuff with it. Plus, a land that's on the battlefield, for example, with Zell, we can't bounce it if it was in our graveyard, but Splendid Rec puts it on the battlefield, so we can bounce it again, discard it again to our commander. You see how it goes. Next is Creeping Renaissance. It's one of the 2 cards in the deck that is land recursion, but also just regular recursion. For 3 and double green, we have a sorcery that says choose a permanent type. Return all cards of the chosen type from your graveyard to your hand. So if we want to get back all of our sorceries, which you've seen quite a few of, we want to let our commander die and get back all of our creatures on our turn, we can certainly do that. Or we can do what we're sort of intending to do and get back all of our lands. And these, unlike Splendid Reclamation, don't go to the battlefield, they go to our hand. So we could attack with our commander, discard a bunch of lands, maybe we have 7 or 8 lands in our graveyard. Next turn, Creeping Renaissance, get them all back, and discard them again. And since Creeping Renaissance also has flashback for 5 and double green, we can do that again and discard all of our cards again and just keep slamming into our opponent's creatures, and then therefore our opponents, because those creatures are gone, as many times as we want. Finally, our other card that's regular recursion in addition to land recursion, it's from Unfinity, but it is not an acorn card, so it is black bordered and legal. For 3 and double green, we have an instant called Pair O Dice Lost. We roll 2 6-sided dice, and we return any number of cards with total mana value X or less from our graveyard to our hand, where X is the total of those results. Then we exile Pair O Dice Lost. So any number of cards with total mana value X or less, all lands have mana value 0. So this lets us get all of our lands back into our hand, and any other card or cards with total mana value X or less in addition. So this is a great recursion piece, especially with our lands, but not only. That covers our land recursion. Let's talk a little bit about what I mentioned earlier about being able to multiply our damage for our commander. We'll talk about the Roller Crusher Ride first. This is from Duskmourn. It is 2 and a red and X. So X, 2 and a red for a legendary enchantment that says when it enters, it deals X damage to each of up to X target creatures. So we can put as much into the X as we want, and we're going to do that much to each of these creatures. We don't have to spread it out. So this is a nice multi-removal piece. In addition, it has a Delirium ability. So if we have 4 or more card types among cards in our graveyard, while we have that, so if we've got, let's say, a land, of course, and then a sorcery and a creature, and let's say an instant, as long as we have 4 or more card types among the cards in our graveyard, then while that's the case, if any of our sources would deal non-combat damage to a permanent or a player, we do double that damage. What that means is if Borborygmos and Fblthp does its trigger and does, we discard 1 land, which will do 2 damage to a creature. With the Roller Crusher Ride in play, if we have Delirium, 4 more card types among cards in our graveyard, then we'll double that damage. So it'll do 1 land to our graveyard, does 4 damage. In addition, if we have Delirium before the Roller Crusher Ride is in play, then when it hits the battlefield, when it enters, it's going to take this damage to each of these creatures and double it as well, assuming we, of course, have Delirium. So Roller Crusher Ride and the Delirium ability, not hard for us to hit in our deck, especially with all the self-mill that we're doing and the discarding that we're doing. So a nice way to conditionally, but still very powerfully, double our damage, and it comes with mass removal. Or not really mass removal, but multi-removal. Next up we have Gratuitous Violence. 2 and triple red for an enchantment that says if a creature we control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage instead. So it's not any of the direct damage, like Fiery Fall, that we have in our deck, but it's everything that our commander would do, which is really what we're trying to get done here. And it's not just non-combat damage, it's damage. So it's our commander doubling up on the already doubled amount of damage it's doing from, twice the amount of lands we've thrown away. It's doubling the damage that Borborygmos and Fblthp deals to our opponent's targeted creatures, but also it's the amount of damage that our commander is doing to our opponent whenever it attacks. And of course, what it's doing to any additional remaining blockers that it may be blocked by. We also have Fiendish Duo, which is 4 and double red for a 5/5 Devil with First Strike. First Strike is very nice in this case. And it says if a source would deal damage to an opponent, it deals double that damage to that player instead. It does not say if a source you control would deal damage. So this means anytime our opponents do damage to one another in the form of combat, in the form of lightning bolts, in any way that they're doing damage, not just losing life, but doing damage, that damage is going to be doubled. All of our opponents take double damage. Not their creatures, just themselves. But all of our opponents take double damage when they take damage. From us or from each other. Fiendish Duo is definite removal bait because it's a great way for our more controlling opponents to say, oh no, our whatever opponents we have that are playing aggro or just playing a big creature strategy are now more powerful because the people with smaller creature strategies aren't going to be doing as much damage. So Fiendish Duo is probably going to get some removal when our commander, might actually be better for them to hit with it, just not as annoyingly so. So Fiendish Duo, again, like I say, not just a strong damage multiplying effect that of course works with the First Strike because it will do 10 damage to an opponent if it's able to hit an opponent, but also it's good removal bait. Finally, we have Angrith's Marauders. 7 mana for a 4/4 human pirate, 5 and double red, that says if a source we control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage to that permanent or player instead. Just doubles all of our damage to anyone, including us, including our own stuff, which might be relevant to us. Angrith's Marauders is 50 cents for a very expensive damage doubler. There are much more powerful damage doublers out there, like Fiery Emancipation, or City on Fire. Those are definitely in the considering section at the bottom of this Moxfield page. I didn't put them in this because I wanted to try and keep our budget down. But some of those are quite good, so worth looking into. So that covers our damage multipliers. Let's look at our damage redirection. This is a good way for us to do damage to a creature with our commander, and then flip that into other creatures or into players even. So we're going to start with Pain for All from Edge of Eternities. This is an aura that we put on a creature we control. Usually it's going to be our commander, maybe not always though, for 2 and a red. It says when it enters, enchanted creature deals damage equal to its power to any other target. So we can take our commander and just do 6 damage to any of our opponents, or 6 damage to any of our opponents' creatures, or their planeswalkers. We don't have any battles in this deck, but we could sure hit a battle with it too if we wanted to. Pain for All is great as a good way for us to throw just removal in this way. But also, when enchanted creature is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to each opponent. So if our commander is blocked and takes 4 damage, all of our opponents are going to take 4 damage when this trigger resolves. What's also nice is Borborygmos and Fblthp, since I mentioned 4 damage, they do twice the number of land cards that they discard in damage to target creature. What that means is, with Pain for All in play, we can discard 2 lands to have Borborygmos and Fblthp do 4 damage to itself, which will then, Pain for All will trigger, and it will do that 4 damage to each opponent. That's if we don't want that damage to go to a creature. We can just do it to all of our opponents. It seems pretty good to me. And if somehow our commander were, I don't know, indestructible, let's say, we could have the Pain for All enters trigger, have Borborygmos and Fblthp deal damage equal to its power to itself. Oh, it's any other target. Pardon me. Never mind. I just got excited at being able to throw this damage around. I think this is Tenok in the story, and Tenok is actually in this deck, so we'll see him soon. Repercussion is next, using, of course, the Wilds of Eldraine Enchanting Tales printing. 1 in double red for an enchantment that says, whenever a creature is dealt damage, this enchantment deals that much damage to that creature's controller. This is a little bit risky for us, because it doesn't only apply to our opponent's creatures. Whenever our commander is dealt damage, Repercussion is going to do that much damage to us. However, whenever our commander does damage to a creature, that creature's controller is going to take that damage as well. So whenever Borborygmos and Fblthp does its direct damage from us discarding land cards to a creature, even if that creature dies, that same amount of damage is going to be dealt by Repercussion to the creature's controller. So this is a way for us to not just redirect the damage, but also just double it up. It's just not doubling the amount of damage being dealt to a single target. It's that the target, or the thing that takes the original amount of damage, the creature, we're going to do that same amount of damage, of course, to its controller. So twice as much damage, just spread out. Yeah. And also, this looks like a giant. Borborygmos is a Cyclops, but is a big one, so there you go. Brash Taunter is next. 4 and a red for a 1/1 indestructible goblin. It's indestructible, but it is a 1/1 for 5 mana. Why do we care about this? Well, because when Brash Taunter is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target opponent. So we can have our commander, when we discard our cards, discard land cards to our commander's triggered ability, we can have all that damage go directly at the Brash Taunter, which Brash Taunter will immediately deal to an opponent. And Brash Taunter is indestructible, so we don't mind. In addition, we can have Brash Taunter fight other creatures for 2, a red, and tap. That means Brash Taunter can just fight our commander if we feel like it. This is not at sorcery speed, so we can wait until our opponent to the right's end step, right before it's our turn, spend the 3 mana we've been holding up, have Brash Taunter fight our commander, and then we're going to do 6 damage to just any player at the table. Any opponent, of course. So very strong, and even stronger when we have our damage doubling effects. Because the way this works with damage doubling, like for example, we have Gratuitous Violence. Creature we control deal damage to a permanent or player, deals twice that much damage. So Brash Taunter, if we activate the fight ability, it will fight our commander. It will do 2 damage to our commander because the damage is doubled, and our commander will do 12 damage to it. Then it is dealing 12 damage to target opponent, but that's also doubled, so it becomes 24 damage because the damage is getting dealt twice. When it's dealt damage, it deals that much damage. So 2 times damage is being dealt. Thanks to Gratuitous Violence, it's doubled both times. So Brash Taunter, for 3 mana, can do 24 damage to an opponent. If, like I said, we've set it up to do that during our opponent to the right's end step, we can do it right then, do 24 damage to an opponent, then untap and do it right again, even during our upkeep, and do another 24 damage. If our opponent hasn't gained at least 9 life and not lost anything, they're out of the game. That's it. That's just a fact of Brash Taunter and the fact that our commander has 6 power. That's how good Brash Taunter is. So keep it in mind. And I should also mention, I guess, it's a 1/1 indestructible, so it's a perfect blocker. Unless our opponent has some kind of evasion, like flying or menace or, obviously trample, yeah, it's going to be able to block whatever we need and not just protect us with its indestructible, but be retributive with the damage that it takes. Finally, we have Stuffy Doll, the original. And I like this art for Stuffy Doll. 5 generic mana for a 0/1 construct, artifact creature construct that is indestructible. And as it enters, we choose a player. Whenever this creature is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to the chosen player, and we can tap it to have it deal 1 damage to itself. So of course that 1 damage will be doubled because it's the Stuffy Doll that's dealing the damage, and then it will be doubled again when we send it to that player, of course, if we have a doubler, like Gratuitous Violence or Angrith's Marauders in play, that sort of thing. Fiendish Duo will double it once, because it won't double the damage it's doing to itself, but it will double the damage when its third ability resolves and it deals the damage to an opponent. So yeah, Stuffy Doll, very good. Easier to cast than Brash Taunter. Not quite as useful because it can only hit one singular opponent that we have to choose when it comes in. And once that player is gone, well, we can't redirect any damage from it to that player anymore. But if we found a way to bounce Stuffy Doll, or if someone at the table does some sort of mass flicker effect, maybe, yeah, Stuffy Doll will be able to recast it and choose another player. Either way though, a 0/1 indestructible creature is a pretty good blocker. So that covers our damage redirection section. We're going to check in, just because it's relevant, to our mass damage section. We're going to see these cards again and again, but first we're going to look at them here because it's relevant while we're talking about all this damage, multiplication, and redirection. So Crackling Perimeter is a 1 and a red enchantment that says if you tap an untapped gate you control, then this enchantment will deal damage to each opponent, deal 1 damage. So this is a classic, it's our opponent to the right's end step. We've got Crackling Perimeter in play. All right, let's tap any gates we have that are untapped to just turn them into damage. That damage, of course, will be multiplied if it's damage from any source to an opponent, or damage just to an opponent if we have that one in play. Yeah, Crackling Perimeter, very strong as a nice supplement to our gates, which of course we will get to, trust me, in the next section. Monument to Endurance is great in so many ways for our deck. 3 generic mana for an artifact, a little expensive, but it's worth it in this deck. It says whenever we discard a card, we choose one of these that has not been chosen this turn. We can draw a card, we can make a treasure token, or each opponent loses 3 life. I know this is the mass damage section, but I want to call out the fact that this is not damage. This is loss of life. Damage causes loss of life, but they are not the same thing. So it's worth recognizing. It's in this section because thematically it fits, but it's not technically damage right here. So any of our damage doublers will not double this. This is loss of life, not damage. However, it does make all of our opponents lose 3 life, and all we had to do was discard a card to do that. If we discard 3 cards, we have to choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. So we can't choose this last effect multiple times, but we sure can choose all 3 of these if we've discarded 3 cards during this turn, and make all of our opponents lose 3 life. Then we make a treasure, or we've already made a treasure and we've already drawn a card when that happens. So pretty good card advantage, a little bit of ramp, and it can spread out some damage. That might be enough to kill our opponents. We've seen Pain for All, and how Pain for All can do damage to each opponent whenever the enchanted creature is dealt damage. But we also have, as I mentioned, Tenuk, Memorial Ensign from Edge of Eternities. Great character, really cool card. If you want to check my Edge of Eternities Commander decks playlist on my channel, you'll see the rare Tenuk that gives everything warp as a commander deck in that playlist. But what does this one do? Tenuk Memorial Ensign is a 2/4 legendary Kavu pilot for 1 red and a green that has a landfall ability. Whenever a land we control enters, Tenuk deals 1 damage to each opponent. That's each opponent, and it is damage, so it does get multiplied. And if this is the second time this turn that this ability has resolved, we draw a card. So Tenuk is either going to be, on our turns, almost always going to be doing 1 damage to each opponent, Sometimes he's going to be doing 2 damage and drawing us a card. Sometimes it's going to be even more damage because our damage is getting multiplied. Tannic is great for card advantage, and also just he's one of our Landfall cards to spread some damage around. Very nice. Last section for our game plan, we're going to talk about our gates. This is a section, it is labeled gates because these are the cards that synergize with gates. The section that is actually gates is called lands-gates, which we will talk about in just a moment. I want to mention them first and just show them to you here. We don't actually have 14 gates, we have 12 gates, and then 2 cards that care about gates in here. One of which is Plaza of Harmony, which we'll talk about when we get to this section. But I'm going to talk about Maze's End right now just to show you this is what I call the Fblthp strategy for our game plan. Maze's End is a regular land that enters tapped. It taps for colorless, but it has this ability. For 3 generic mana, we can tap it and bounce it to our hand to search our library for a gate and put it on the battlefield and then shuffle. So that's great as like a tutor for a gate card. We just get to get it out of our library onto the battlefield. Gates usually come into play tapped, but that's okay. You know, it just finds it from our library. But also, if as part of that same ability, if we can find that gate, put it on the battlefield, and then we control 10 or more gates with different names, we just win the game. Maze's End is just a classic. Because if we do this, when we have, 2 other gates in play, we tap Maze's End and 3 other mana, bounce Maze's End, get a gate into play, and then all we have is that gate. And then we make our land drop for the turn, and it's Maze's End. Put it right back. We can, on the next turn, tap it for mana if we want, or we can do this all over again. We generally want to do this, if we need it for the mana as a tap land, that's fine, but our hope is to hold Maze's End in our hand and either discard it to our commander's ability and then get it back onto the battlefield with something like Splendid Reclamation, or back into our hand with something like Life from the Loam, or hold it in our hand until we can make this happen. Like maybe we already have 10 gates in play or 9 gates in play. We play Maze's End or get it onto the battlefield some way. We untap it. Maybe we can get it in untapped. There's 2 ways to do that. And immediately activate it. And as long as we have 10 gates with different names in play once this resolves, then we win the game. It is worth recognizing that our opponents cannot blow up Maze's End in response to this trigger because the colon is on the right side of putting it back in our hand. That means putting it back in our hand is part of the cost of activating this ability, and our opponents don't get to respond to this ability until it is on the stack, which is to say after we've paid the cost. So all that to say, if we've got 9 or 10 gates in play, and at least 1 gate left in our library, I suppose, if Maze's End is untapped, we can go ahead and activate this, and we just win. So yeah, excellent card, great for our deck, and we have 12 actual typed cards that are the type gate. But what are we using those for? Let's talk about our gates section of spells. The first one is Open the Gates, as we've seen. It's just Lay of the Land for a gate. We've already seen Crackling Perimeter as well. It lets us use our gates to do mass damage, 1 damage to each opponent. We've seen Great Gatekeeper Vine. It is Open the Gates on a body. We've seen District Guide, which is also Open the Gates on a body, but we haven't seen Glaive of the Guild Pact. This is an equipment for 2 generic mana, and it equips for 3. We have an equipment that says equipped creature gets +1/+0 for each gate you control, and has Vigilance and Menace. So our commander, interestingly, doesn't have any evasive abilities. But by making it a 6/5 Menace, that's basically making its attack trigger twice as good. Because we attack when our opponent has a single creature, and we kill that creature, hopefully, with our attack trigger, and we get in, and we do our damage. Now, if our opponent has 2 creatures, we just put Glaive of the Guild Pact on our commander. We attack, we kill one of the creatures, and Menace means they can't block because they only have 1 creature left. So it's just like if they had 1 creature and we killed it. Not to mention, it gives our commander Menace, which is excellent for, Vigilance, I should say. I selected it and said the wrong thing. It gives them Vigilance, which is excellent because we still can block with our commander then. And it pumps up our commander's power for each gate we have in play. so that we're able to do even more commander damage to our opponent, or just damage, but still commander damage for sure, getting us closer and closer to just defeating our opponents that way. Next we have Gates Ablaze. It's a Wrath. 2 and a red for a sorcery that deals X damage to each creature. That includes our own, but it's worth it, where X is the number of gates we control. This is a source doing damage, so we have a couple of multipliers that could even multiply this. But it may be the case that we have 8 or 9 gates in play when we cast this. That's going to kill most things. Guild Summit is sort of the blue mirror of Gates Ablaze. It says for 2 and a blue, we have an enchantment that says when it enters, we may tap any number of untapped gates we control, and we draw a card for each gate we tapped that way. In addition, we have Gatefall. Whenever a gate we control enters, we draw a card. So Guild Summit doesn't do much for us unless we have gates already in play. If we don't have any gates in play, it's a do-nothing enchantment. An enchantment that does nothing when it comes in and doesn't affect the board immediately. But if we have at least one gate and it's untapped, we can tap it and draw a card. We might be able to do that with 3 or 4 or 6 or 7 gates. Just draw an awful lot of stuff. And when we draw those things, what does that mean? We're pretty likely to draw lands that we can then throw away with our commander's attack trigger. And later on, whenever we have gates enter, we draw more cards, and that maybe means more lands we can also use to fuel our commander's attack trigger. Remember, we have 40 cards in the deck that are land cards, and 1 card that is not a land card, but we can play the backside of it as an MDFC, as a land. We can't discard that to our commander's trigger because the front side's not a land, but we'll talk about that once we get to it. Next, we have Navigation Orb. 3 generic mana for an artifact that says for 2, tap and sack it, we get to Circuitous Route. Search our library for up to 2 basic lands and or gates, reveal them, put them on the battlefield tapped, or put one on the battlefield tapped and the other into our hand and then shuffle. So I'm sorry, it's not Circuitous Route. It's sort of like Cultivate, but for gates. So a little expensive for Cultivate, but for gates, but it puts 1 directly on the battlefield and 1 into our hand. So this puts cards into our hand. Again, we don't have to get gates. We can get basics if we want to, but it's really good for us to get gates if we can. And so it puts 1 on the battlefield tapped and the other in our hand that we can use to either play for our land drop that turn, hang on to it for the next turn, or discard it to our commander's attack trigger and just turn it directly into damage. Next up, very cool, from Modern Horizons 3's Commander product, Sage of the Maze is 2 and a green for a 1/3 elf wizard that we can tap to add 2 mana in any combination of colors. 2 red, 2 green, 2 blue, 1 blue and a red or a green, 1 red, a green or a blue, etc. 3 mana dork that makes 2 mana is very strong. In addition, we can tap it and it says until end of turn, target land we control becomes an XX citizen creature with haste in addition to its other types, where X is the number of gates we control, only as a sorcery. So if we really need to, and we have some gates in play, we can turn one of our lands, which itself does not have to be a gate, into a creature. Maybe we need a surprise blocker, or maybe we have the ability to swing in for the win as long as we have an extra creature. Sage of the Maze can do that for us. Even though it is itself a creature, it may not be as big as twice the number of gates we control. So a bonus creature is very nice. But in addition, this is what's so awesome. We can tap an untapped gate we control to untap Sage of the Maze. Meaning we can double up on this, make multiple lands into huge creatures this turn. Or maybe probably even more powerful, just tap this for 2, tap a land, one of our gates, to untap this, tap this for 2 more. We ended up with 2 permanents tapped and 4 mana in our pool. And we can keep doing that for every additional untapped gate we have. Sage of the Maze is excellent in this deck. Next we have Spelunking. Spelunking is a special card in this deck. Really kind of interesting ways that it can interact with things, but I will explain it. First, the card text. For 2 and a green, we have an enchantment that says when it enters, we draw a card, and we may put a land from our hand onto the battlefield. And if we put a cave onto the battlefield this way, we gain 4 life. So cave, just like gate, is a subtype for lands. We have 2 caves in our deck, so there is a chance that we may be able to gain 4 life off of this. But really what we care about is the growth spiral effect. When it enters, we draw a card, and we can put a land from our hand onto the battlefield, if we want to. We're going to draw either way. But it also says, lands we control, enter untapped. This is a replacement effect. That means that it changes the way the rules of the game normally work. Now, I know you're thinking, don't lands typically enter untapped? Well, they do, it's true. Except for, like I mentioned, gates. Let's take a look at our actual gates. For example, let's look at Cliffgate. Cliffgate is a gate, it's a land, it's a subtype with gate, but it says this land enters tapped. This is also a replacement effect. It's changing the effect that, or the event rather, which is this land entering. It's saying, but we have another rule. Instead of entering, this is going to enter tapped. And you say, oh, okay, sure. That's fine. Don't judge me for forgetting how to spell splunking. All right. Splunking is a different replacement effect. It says our lands enter untapped. So because we have multiple replacement effects that are applying to the same event, we get to choose sort of which one wins by ordering them however we choose to. So if we have, I'm just going to say this in the simplest way. If we have a gate like the Gruul Guild gate that says this land enters tapped, and Splunking, which says lands we control enter untapped, we can say, well, apply the first one, the Gruul Guild gate first, and then the Splunking one second. So the Splunking one is going to win, so it comes in untapped. We saw earlier Splendid Reclamation. Splendid Reclamation returns all our land cards from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped. If Splunking isn't in play, this is them entering. They're coming from our graveyard to the battlefield, so they're entering the battlefield. Splunking says tapped, but we have a replacement effect for that. I'm sorry, Splendid Reclamation brings them back to the battlefield tapped. Splunking brings them back to the battlefield untapped. So we get to choose for Splunking to win. And in basically every case in our deck, Splunking will win. So this means every one of our cards, every one of our land cards is going to come in untapped if we want it to, and we generally are going to want it to. So Splunking helps our gates, which is why it's, even though it doesn't have the word gate in its rules text, it's in the gates section, because it's here to help our gates come in untapped, as well as all of our other tap lands, or lands that would have otherwise come in tapped from something like Splendid Reclamation, or Cultivate even. Yeah, they don't. Navigation Orb, for example, finds us 2 basics or gates. One goes in our hand, one comes in tapped. But if Splunking's in play, it doesn't come in tapped. It comes in untapped. In case you are worried that I am wrong, take a look at the rulings that are Splunking, and they will explain how replacement effects work in the case of it. Just also remember that you can maybe gain some life if you choose to put a cave into play. But it doesn't have to be a cave. It can be any land in your hand. So, we do have Circuitous Route here. Circuitous Route is supposed to be in the Land Tutors section as well. So we will put it in there. I thought I didn't put it in the deck, but apparently I did. So yeah, just didn't tag it properly. That's why, even when you check this multiple times, tags are so intensive. You have so many different cards that do so many things. Sometimes you just forget. So forgive me, please, dear viewers, or yell at me in the comments, or thank me in the comments for apologizing here. Who knows? Did I apologize? I'm sorry. There you go. In any case, Circuitous Route, we've already seen this effect, but we have it here in addition because it specifically cares about gates. 3 and a green for a sorcery, and we Explosive Vegetation, but for gates too. Search our library for up to 2 basics and/or gates, put them on the battlefield tapped, shuffle. Good ramp, good way to get gates into play, and of course, tutor for lands. Way of the Thief also cares about gates. 3 and a blue for another aura. This enchants one of our creatures. And it gives a enchanted creature +2/+2, and it says they can't be blocked as long as we control a gate. So we have 12 cards in the deck that just are gates, and at least one other card that can become a gate. So Way of the Thief is a great way for us to make our commander unblockable. Not to mention, our commander will become an 8/7. That means 3 hits from it is a commander damage win, because that's at least 21, that's 24 damage. So yeah, Way of the Thief is very nice in this deck. Thanks, Gatecrash, for something. We've seen Explore the Underdark, and how I talked about earlier that it was just circuitous route, but for an extra mana, and it lets us take the initiative. And finally, we have Gate Colossus. No deck with a Gates theme would be complete without Gate Colossus. We didn't put Gatebreaker Ram in here, couldn't quite fit it in, but it's definitely in the considering section. In any case, Gate Colossus is 8 generic mana for an 8/8 artifact creature construct with affinity for gates. It's never been printed to say that, I don't believe, but that is what it's oracled to say now, which just means that it costs 1 generic mana less for every gate we control, which might mean if we have 8 gates in play, it's free. That's how it works. And it can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. But in addition, whenever a gate we control enters, we may put this card from our graveyard on top of our library. So as a way to just get it back, we have an 8/8 creature. It doesn't have trample, that's true, but it sure can't be blocked by little creatures. It can just slam in for 8 damage, and if our opponents kill it, we just have to play another gate. And it can go right on top of our library, which, as you will see with the card that will be coming up soon, we might be able to get that directly into play for free even without casting it. But we might just draw it and have to pay nothing for it if we have enough gates. So yeah, Gate Colossus is pretty fun in this deck. So that covers all of our cards that I would say are crucial to our game plan. We're going to talk now about the support sections for our game plan, starting with our card advantage section. I have used the word draw here, as I always do, just as a shorthand for card advantage. It doesn't necessarily mean every one of these cards literally draws us a card. Slip Through Space does. Slip Through Space is another one of our sort of Voltron-y cards. It's one that is meant to help our commander kill with commander damage, if it's able to. For a single blue, we have a sorcery that has Devoid, which means this card has no color. Not really relevant in our deck, but maybe useful if someone has like a Pyroblast or something. It says target creature cannot be blocked this turn and draw a card. So it doesn't do a whole lot for us in terms of our big game plan, like the strategy we're going for with our lands and our gates and what have you. But sometimes our commander, which is going to be attacking as many times as we can because that's how we get our triggers off of it, needs to not die. So it needs not to be blocked. Even if we can't kill all of their blockers, we can still slip through space and make it so our commander is not going to be blockable for this turn. I like to hold up Slip Through Space if it looks like we're going to win the game or be close to winning the game with an attack. So it lets us get in with our commander and maybe get 2 or just close to our commander damage win. But of course we can throw this on Gate Colossus or something else that's large and slam in for the win with that as well, or at least for just a lot of damage. And we draw a card. Can't hurt with that. Also, I guess I should mention this. It says target creature. It doesn't say target creature we control. So Slip Through Space can make an opponent's creature unblockable. And we can therefore use it politically. We can say, hey, opponent A, I know opponent B has been menacing you, but I know you're pretty close to killing them too. What if I make one of your creatures unblockable? You can attack, take out opponent B. That would be pretty good for me as long as you agree that you're not coming after me next, at least for a turn or two. That's a pretty good deal, and that scenario it involves a player dying. It doesn't have to be that big. We can just say, look, I know you're trying to get an attack trigger from your commander or from this value creature you have. I will make them unblockable if you attack someone other than me and then leave me alone for a turn cycle. That's pretty good for a single blue mana. You make a good deal with someone and you draw a card so it replaces itself. Slip Through Space is great. Up the Beanstalk is also great. We have quite a few cards in this deck that are expensive, especially our commander. So Up the Beanstalk is pretty useful for those. For 1 and a green, we get an enchantment that says when it enters, or whenever we cast a spell with mana value 5 or greater, we draw a card. So this is repeatable card advantage for us that we get just for playing the deck that we're playing anyway, and it replaces itself when it first comes in. It's also worth noticing that this says mana value 5 or greater. Gate Colossus has affinity for gates, so we might not pay 5 for it. We might not pay anything for it, but its mana value does not change even if we're paying less due to cost reductions. So Up the Beanstalk will trigger every time we cast the Gate Colossus, every time we cast the Gate Colossus. and anything else that's mana value 5 or greater. So yeah. We've got Garruk's Uprising, just as a good way to give our commander some evasion, because Garruk's Uprising is an enchantment for 2 and a green that gives all of our creatures trample. Gate Colossus doesn't have evasion either. Would be nice if it had trample. With Garruk's Uprising in play, it does. But it's in this section because when it enters, if we control a creature with power 4 or greater, like our commander, we draw a card. And while it's in play, whenever a creature with 4 or greater enters under our control, we draw a card. Repeatable card advantage for us with our big creatures, of which we have several. We've seen Guild Summit and how it can draw us cards when it enters and whenever our gates enter. We've seen Monument to Endurance. Whenever we discard a card, we can draw one. When Splunking enters, we draw a card, and we of course get to do that as part of a sort of growth spiral effect. Tannock, if we make our second landfall trigger in the same turn, we get to draw a card. Next is Captain Howler Sea Scourge, really cool card for our deck. 2, a blue and a red for a legendary Shark Pirate. That is a 5/4 with Ward 2 and pay 2 life. So if someone wants to target Captain Howler, one of our opponents, with a spell or ability, they have to pay 2 generic mana and 2 life, or Captain Howler's Ward trigger counters that spell or ability. More importantly though, whenever we discard 1 or more cards, target creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn for each card discarded this way, and whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player this turn, we draw a card. So this is sweet, because not only do we get a trigger here where if our commander attacks and we discard, let's say, 2 lands, not only is our commander going to do 4 damage to a creature, it's going to get +4/+0 until end of turn. And whenever it deals combat damage, which it probably will at that point, being a 10/5, we're going to draw a card. Combat damage to a player, of course, doesn't count if they block with a different creature, but still, we're probably going to kill that creature thanks to the power bonus if we weren't going to anyway. So Captain Howler is excellent. It's also worth noting that this whole trigger can happen twice, or can happen multiple times. Let's say we attack with our commander, and we throw away a single land. Our commander is going to get +2/+0, becoming an 8/5 until end of turn, and it's going to get this. So whenever our commander does combat damage to a player this turn, we'll draw a card. But let's say before our commander does that damage, we land cycle Fiery Fall. Well, we're going to get to find a basic land and put it into our hand and shuffle, which means we've discarded a card. Captain Howler will trigger a second time. We'll be able to give our commander an additional +2/+0, and this will apply again, which means if our commander does damage, which of course in this scenario will be 10 damage, our commander is going to draw us 2 cards because this whole trigger has resolved twice. So this ability has been granted to our commander twice. So it's going to trigger twice when our commander does the damage, and we'll draw 2 cards off of it. Not going to happen that often in our deck, but sometimes it might, and it's worth remembering. Being able to discard cards and get this bonus, and then get this effect as well multiple times, it's not going to come up in just one way. Next, we have Case of the Locked Hothouse, card I really like. For 3 and a green, we have an enchantment. It's a case type enchantment that gives us the ability to play an extra land on each of our turns. Excellent way for us to get cards out of our hand if we don't think we're going to need them for our commander, or if we have ways to play out of our graveyard, to play cards out of our graveyard as land drops, just the same way that Zelnicht does. In addition, being a case, it has a solve condition. What that means is, if the case is not solved, when we get to our end step, it becomes solved if we meet this condition, which is just we control 7 or more lands. We have 7 or more lands in play. Once it is solved, Case of the Locked Hothouse remains solved for as long as it's on the battlefield. And when it is, it gains this additional ability down here, which is we can look at the top card of our library at any time, and we can play spells, or play lands and cast creature and enchantment spells from the top of our library. So this is a great way to give us card advantage, but not in the form of draw, by giving us access to the top of our library. We can get lands off the top of it, directly into play. We can get creatures and enchantments off the top of it by casting them. It's not like we have drawn a card, it's like we have an extra card in our hand at all times. It's just sometimes if that card is, a sorcery or an instant or something along those lines, anything other than a land, creature, or enchantment, we can't do anything with it. But it's nice to know that that's where it is, which is again relevant for a different card we have, which we'll talk about in just a moment. First though, another one of our Landfall cards. Tatiova Benthic Druid is a 3/3 legendary merfolk druid for 3, a green and a blue, that has the simplest landfall trigger. Whenever a land you control enters, gain life and draw a card. It gains us a little life, which is nice, but draws us cards whenever our lands come into play. Heck yes, let's do that. Especially when we have things like Case of the Locked Hothouse, letting us have multiple land drops. Pretty good. But I've mentioned a couple of times that there are some ways to take advantage of the top of our library, like with Case of the Locked Hothouse, or to deal with our commander's second ability. Let's look at that again real quick. Borborygmos and Fblthp says, 1 and a blue, we can put them into our library, 3rd from the top. We don't usually want to do this, because they're in our library, so we can't get to them. And if our opponent says, oh, well, shuffle your library, we don't get to then put them in the command zone. Because they're already in that zone, they have not changed zones, so we don't have the ability to move them to the command zone instead. So this is a little bit challenging. This ability normally, like I said, comes in the form of, we're going to use this essentially just to put our commander back in the command zone, to maybe protect them from some kind of removal spell, or maybe our opponent wants to lock them down with an oubliette, or an imprisoned to the moon, something like that, a witness protection. We want to respond to that and put our commander back in the command zone. But we can, if we choose, put it in our library 3rd from the top. The reason I'm bringing that up is because this is the only card. There are several more in the considering section that might be relevant. This is a very expensive card for the kind of decks I build, but this is such a cool effect for our commander that I wanted to show you Lurking Predators. For 4 and double green, we have an enchantment that says whenever an opponent casts a spell, any spell, we can reveal the top card of our library, and if it's a creature card, we can put it on the battlefield, and otherwise we can put it on the bottom of our library. So this means if we need to or want to, we can pay that 1 and a blue and put our commander 3rd from the top in our library, and then pass the turn. I mean, we don't have to pass the turn then, but let's say we do. Our opponents, every time they cast a spell, we will have Lurking Predators trigger, we'll look at the top card of our library, we'll reveal it really, everyone will look at it, and if it's not a creature, we're just going to put it on the bottom of our library. It doesn't even matter if it was a cool spell in another way, because it's either going to stay on top of our library or go to the bottom, unless it's a creature, in which case we'll put it on the battlefield. So all of our opponents, all they have to do is cast 3 total spells before our next turn, and whenever they cast a spell, we will reveal the top card, put any creatures onto play and anything else on the bottom, and we'll get to our commander again. The 3rd spell they cast, our commander is going to be what's on top of our library. We'll reveal it and put it right back onto the battlefield. We get to completely cheat our commander tax. Our commander comes right back, and we're set. And then, hopefully, if they target it again with a Source of Plowshares or something along those lines, or even a board wipe gets played, we can pay that 1 and a blue again, put it right back in our library, and with Lurking Predators in play, we can almost certainly get it back. Now, if we haven't gotten it back by our turn, well, we have lots of ways to draw cards beyond just our draw step, but even if all we have is our draw step, we can get back to our commander. Again, this is quite risky, because it's always the possibility that our opponent might make us do a wheel effect. They might do a Days Undoing, where we shuffle our graveyard and hand into our library and draw a new 7, which means that's unfortunate. Our commander is gone forever for the rest of this game, but we took a big swing, and with Lurking Predators, usually that's going to work out pretty well for us. I mean, we're getting to put other creatures into play if we want to, even without our commander being back in our commands in our library. But it is worth recognizing that if an opponent makes us mill our commander, then that is a time when our commander is changing zones, and we can, once it goes to the graveyard as a state-based action, put it back into the command zone. So we don't have to worry about trying to recur it from the graveyard. If it gets there thanks to us tucking in our library, we can always put it back in the command zone. Lurking Predators just gives us a way to cheat that. I paused because I want to say possibly cheat it, but it's kind of probably cheated. Because this is the Rhystic Study trigger. It's when an opponent casts a spell. That's going to happen at least once, probably, on each opponent's turn. We've probably got 3 opponents, so we're probably going to get our commander back on the battlefield. Again, it's risky and it's an expensive card, so there's definitely options in the considering section you might want to use instead. Maybe you want to throw in a different card for damage multiplication or damage redirection. Maybe you want to get more landfall into this. There's lots of different things you could do instead of Lurking Predators. And I specifically made it sure that I have 11 cards in my card advantage section, so that if you wanted to swap out Lurking Predators because you don't want to spend the money on it or you don't think it fits exactly what you're doing, sure, that makes sense. But it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to have a commander that can tuck itself, and so thereby, thanks to the fact that other people are playing spells, kind of get around the commander tax. And whenever you have to shuffle your commander away, and that's going to be a fun story to tell. So yeah, Lurking Predators is a lot of fun and really great in this deck. So next up, since we've talked about our card advantage, let's talk about acceleration. Which of course I have just shorthanded as ramp. In all likelihood, you know Sol Ring. It costs 1, taps for 2. It's sort of the the mascot of our format. So yeah, you want it in your deck. Arcane Signet, just as important, or almost as powerful. 2 generic mana for an artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. So this is a rock that comes in untapped and taps for blue, red, or green. Yeah, we want that. Doppelgang is such a weird inclusion in this deck for the reasons that I've put it in, but it's so good for us. Doppelgang is a sorcery that says for each of X targets, you create X tokens that are copies of that permanent. And it costs a green, a blue, and triple X. So that means we have to spend 5 mana on this if we want X to be 1, because it's 1, 1, 1, a green and a blue. And if we did that, we would say for 1 target, we make 1 copy of it. So we might copy, our Lurking Predators enchantment, and we've got 2 of those. But the real reason Doppelgang is in this deck, and the reason I put it in the acceleration section, is because we want to target our lands with this. We could say, if we have a lot of land in play, let's say we're willing to put 8 mana into Doppelgang, where X equals 2. So 2, 2, 2, and green and a blue, that's 8. That means for 2 of our lands, let's pretend, we make 2 copies of each of them. We've played 8 mana and gotten 4 more lands. If we're somehow able to pay 11 mana with X equals 3, we can target 3 of our lands and make 3 copies of each. And now we have 9 mana in addition to what we used to have. We paid 11 and got 9 new lands. That's not just good for our landfall triggers. That means that we have a bunch of token copies of lands. And if we're bouncing lands, we can bounce the originals. We don't have to worry about the token copies. We could bounce those tokens if we really want to get rid of them forever. But we can also bounce the originals and then discard them and then recur them in a different way, and we don't have to worry about it. There's just so much ramp possibilities to get out of Doppelgang, plus making copies of our other stuff. I mean, this is just a Simic dream, being able to use this. So live the dream. Don't let your dreams be memes. Oh, I really love Ebony Fly. Ebony Fly is 2 generic mana for an artifact that comes in taps and taps for colorless. So it's a slow 2 mana rock, which is still a 2 mana rock. But also, for 4 generic mana, we can roll a d6, and until end of turn, we may have the Ebony Fly become an insect artifact creature token with flying, with power and toughness equal to the result of that roll. We can't do that multiple times and roll multiple times and have them add together. If we roll a 2 the first time and a 4 the second time, it's still a 4/4 in the same turn. But in any case, it can just become a friend that can fly around for us and maybe attack. And if it attacks, one of our other target attacking creatures gains flying until end of turn, which means this is a way for us to jump our commander. We can take this mana rock, spend 4 mana, make it into at least a 1/1, that if that's not going to be killed by flying blockers or reach blockers, we have it attack one of our opponents, and then have our commander also attack, get its trigger, and attack maybe the same opponent, maybe a different opponent, but it sure does get in with flying. So Ebony Fly, not just a slow mana rock, but also a good way for us to give our commander evasion. Next is World Soul's Rage from originally Murders at Karlov Manor. Spoilers. For X, a red and a green, we have a sorcery that deals X damage to any target, so it's just good removal. And we put up to X land cards from our hand and or graveyard onto the battlefield tapped. So we get to get a bunch of the cards that we've been throwing away, the lands cards we've been throwing away for our commander's triggered ability, into play as ramp. So yeah, World Soul's Rage, not superlative like early game, but mid to late game, very, very nice. We've seen Cultivate, of course, and we've seen Kodama's Reach, both excellent ramp spells. We also have Horizon Explorer. This is our second Splunking, because for 2 and a green, we get a 2/4 Insect Scout that makes our lands enter untapped. So it fixes our gates and every other card that we have in here that is, going to come in untapped for any reason. In addition, whenever we attack a player, we make a Lander token. Lander tokens are Wayfarer's Baubles. They are artifacts that have the ability for us to pay 2 and tap and sacrifice them to Rampant Growth. Find a basic land, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. That doesn't put it in our hand, which is fine. It just gives us a little ramp. But I want to make mention that it says whenever you attack a player, not whenever this creature attacks a player. So if we attack with our commander while Horizon Explorer is in play, we're going to get that Lander token. Next is Monument to Endurance. We've seen it. It gives us treasure tokens when we discard if we choose that mode. Navigation Orb gives us a gate-based Cultivate. Sage of the Maze can tap for mana. Splunking, of course, gives us the ability to put a land from our hand onto the battlefield, and all of our lands enter the battlefield untapped. Undergrowth Recon can take our land cards out of the graveyard, put them on the battlefield tapped. Zelnicht, of course, gives us the ability to play extra lands on our turns, as does Case of the Locked Hothouse. Circuitous Route is Explosive Vegetation, but with gates, so we find 2 basics or gates, put them on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. Splendid Wreck brings our lands back from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Explore the Underdark does the same thing as Circuitous Route, but also takes us the initiative. And finally, a card we haven't seen yet, Famished Worldsire. Incredible art. Very cool card from Edge of Eternities. 5 and triple green, so a big one, for a 0/0 Leviathan with Ward 3 generic mana that has Devour Land 3, which means as this enters, we can sacrifice any number of our lands, and it enters with 3 1/1 counters for every land we sacrifice this way. So if we sacrifice 5 lands, this comes in as a 15/15 creature. And when it enters, we look at the top X cards of our library, where X is this creature's power. So in that example, we look at the top 15 cards. We can put any number of lands from among those that we looked at onto the battlefield tapped and then shuffle. So the idea is, for every land we eat, this has 3 counters on it, and we get to look 3 cards deep into our library. Any of the lands we find in it, we can just put right onto the battlefield. So it doesn't put them into our hand in a way that our commander might like, but it sure does, with the Devour Land ability, put cards into our graveyard, which we might be able to then get back with some of the cards that we have, like our Delve card, Life from the Loam. So yeah, that is our acceleration section. Let's start talking about interaction, which again I've just keyworded as removal here. Bushwhack can have one of our creatures fight another creature. That's good removal. Simic Charm is a green and a blue for an instant that says choose one. Target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn, so a good way for us to maybe push ourselves just a little bit over where we need to get commander damage win. Our commander has 6 power, so if we hit 3 times, that's 18. If we hit 2 times and then on the third we give it +3/+3, that's 21, and that's the game for that player. We can also choose to give all of our permanents hexproof until end of turn, great protection, or we can bounce a creature to its owner's hand. That doesn't have to be an opponent's creature. We can protect our creatures that way, put our commander back in our hand and not have to pay the commander tax again, or we can bounce the scariest thing on our opponent's board before we blow up the next scariest thing with our commander's attack ability and swing in to hit them. Next we have Stump Stomp. This is the MDFC card, the modal double-faced card that I've been mentioning. For 1 and a green or red, we can have it, the sorcery, target creature deals damage equal to its power to target creature or planeswalker we don't control. It's just a bite spell, and it's a pretty good bite. We can play it with green or with red mana. What's also nice is that on the back side, it's a land. It enters tapped, Burn Willow Clearing, and it taps for red or green. Now this is a land on the back side, not on the front, which means in every zone other than the battlefield, this is just a sorcery. It's just Stump Stomp. But when we play it, we can choose to play it as this land. We cannot, however, discard Stump Stomp from our hand to our commander's attack ability because we have to discard land cards, and this is only a land on the back, which is to say, in our hand, it's not a land card. Still, we can certainly play this either as Stump Stomp to hurt our, to remove creatures and planeswalkers, or if it's in our hand and we're really looking for mana, or we just have several cards in our hand that are lands that we don't want to play as lands, because we want to keep our lands in hand to use for our commander's ability, we can just play Stump Stomp as Burn Willow Clearing. And now we've made our land drop, and we've got lands in hand that we can use in other ways. We've seen World Soul's Rage, and it's good multiple removal. Next up, I think this is just a cool card in this deck. This is an old card from Theros, Bow of Nylea. 1 and double green for a legendary enchantment artifact. It's an enchantment and an artifact that gives all of our attacking creatures Death Touch. I want to talk about that first. If our commander attacks, they are now an attacking creature. If we then discard cards to their attack trigger, they're going to do damage to a creature. Direct damage. 2 damage for each land that they've thrown away. That is them doing the damage, and they are attacking, so they have Death Touch. So we don't need to throw away more than 1 land to kill any creature that's not indestructible. Because the damage that they do is going to be Death Touch damage, and that just kills them. So Bow of Nylea doesn't just help all of our creatures, or it helps specifically our commander even more. And I've mentioned in other videos, Death Touch a lot of times is a little bit like Evasion. Because if you attack with a Death Touching creature, your opponent knows, unless they have an indestructible blocker, their creature's going to die if they block with it. And they have so much life. Why would they throw away their creature when they can spend some of their life as a resource by not blocking? Just take the damage, and they don't lose their creature to the Death Touch, and they feel like they've come out ahead. So in a way, it discourages players from blocking, and so it's kind of like Evasion. But Bow of Nylea doesn't stop there. It's only 3 mana, and it gives us something so great for our commander, but in addition, we can pay 1 and a green and tap it to either put a counter on a creature, could be our creature, could be an opponent's creature, could be our commander. Again, maybe not helpful on our opponent's creatures that much, but that's a little bit of politicking you can do, especially when this is at instant speed. We can use this to make a bad attack into a trade, or make a trade into a better block, like a block that just eats a creature. They can definitely be useful politics-wise. We can have Bow of Nylea deal 2 damage to target creature with flying. This is not Death Touch damage, because it only applies to attacking creatures, and the bow is itself not a creature that can attack, but of course, that can just kill something in the air. We can have us gain 3 life. If we've just got 2 mana sitting around, and it's about to be our turn again, sure, why not? Or we can put up to 4 target cards from our graveyard on the bottom of our library in any order. Not usually going to come up, but maybe an opponent is running a deck that has Rise of the Dark Realms in it, or some kind of other effect that can use the cards in our graveyard for their advantage. Well, let's get rid of them, put them on the bottom of our library. I really love the bow in this deck. Pain for All enters, and the enchanted creature deals damage equal to its power to any other target. That's good removal. The Roller Crusher Ride enters, and it deals X damage to each of up to X target creatures. X is in the casting cost, of course. And like I said, Fiery Fall just does 5 damage to a target creature. So we're a little light on removal in this deck. I usually run at least 10. But remember, our commander has repeated removal in the form of its attack trigger. So we're going to be able to get plenty of removal out of them. Last, in this section, we're going to look at our Wraths. We've seen 2 of them already, how Nylea's Intervention can deal twice X damage to each creature with flying. It's not a perfect Wrath, but it gets rid of flyers. Maybe one of our opponents is playing a Dragon's deck. Gates Ablaze can, again, it's not going to kill everything, but the number of gates we control, each creature takes that much damage, pretty good. But we also have Dragonback Assault, similar idea. For 3 and Temur, we have an enchantment that when it enters, it deals 3 damage to each creature and each planeswalker. So this might be doubled by one of our damage doublers, but in any case, it's going to get rid of everything that's kind of small. And it has a landfall trigger. Whenever a land we control enters, we make a 4/4 dragon with flying. So this is a great way for us to have like backup for our commander. And one of the reasons that I'm totally fine with us not having that many creatures in our deck that's all about combat. That covers our wraths and therefore our support section. We have several other categories I want to go through that supplement our game plan and that show the overlap between the usefulness of the cards on our deck. We're going to start with our discard section. This shows us cards that we've seen all of, but all of these give us value when we discard cards. Monument to Endurance, when we discard a card, it just gives us value. That's what we care about. Slogurk doesn't trigger specifically on discard, but it does trigger when lands get put into our graveyard, which mostly is going to be from us discarding it to our commander's ability. Captain Howler gives us value when we discard one or more cards, and of course Fiery Fall itself will discard itself when we basic land cycle it, if we do. We have a Landfall section, which we've seen all these cards, of course, just to cover them again. Tanuk deals damage whenever we have land enter under our control, and if it resolves twice in our turn, we also draw cards. Tatyova always draws us cards from land coming in and gives us life gain, and Dragonback Assault, like we've just seen a moment ago, gives us 4/4 flying dragon tokens. We have an Evasion section. This is cards that we've seen all of already, of course, that are mostly for our commander, but we could use them for something big as well, like the Gate Colossus. Slip Through Space makes a creature unblockable until end of turn. Ebony Fly can help jump one of our creatures, give them flying until end of turn. Glaive of the Guild Pact can give an equipped creature Menace, plus Vigilance, which is an evasion, but it's nice. Garruk's Uprising gives all of our creatures trample, and Way of the Thief just makes one of our creatures, the enchanted creature, unblockable as long as we control a gate. We've seen that. Let's take a look at our graveyard section. These are cards that care about or are able to manipulate our graveyard some way. Life from the Loam, of course, has Dredge, so it lets us not just get 3 land cards out of our graveyard, but it lets us mill ourselves to fill up our graveyard if we need to do that to be able to maybe Life from the Loam again. Glacierwood Siege lets us play lands out of our graveyard, but also we can make people mill, including ourselves, if we really wanted to choose Temur when this comes in. Slogurk, of course, lets us do a good impression of Life from the Loam whenever it leaves the battlefield, and of course gets counters on it when lands are put into our graveyard, as we already saw in the discard section. Roller Crusher Ride cares about the graveyard in that it cares about Delirium. So when we're doing these things, we would like to try and keep Delirium if we can. Keep at least 4 cards with different types, or 4 types among the cards we control, or the cards that we have in our graveyard, keep them there. Finally, Famished Worldsire, of course, can devour lands, and therefore put a bunch of cards in our graveyard that are land cards that we can then recur if we want to. Next, we have a protection section, which we've seen one of. Simic Charm, of course, can give all of our permanents hexproof until end of turn, and we can put the Swiftfoot Boots on our commander. 2 generic mana for an equipment that gives equipped creature hexproof and haste, and only equips for 1. If you really want to do the Lightning Greaves, you could do that, but I prefer Swiftfoot Boots generally because they're more of a budget option. We have a recursion section that's not just land recursion. We have seen them both because they can do more than just lands. Creeping Renaissance can bring all cards of a chosen type back from our graveyard to our hand, and we can flash it back and choose a different type if we want. And of course, Paradise Lost is going to bring back all of our lands and any number of cards with total mana value X or less, where X is, of course, the result of the 2 dice we roll. Last for this, we have a synergy section. These are cards, which we've seen all but one of, that synergize with our commander in a lot of different ways. Basilisk Collar costs 1 generic mana and equips for 2, it's an equipment, and it gives equipped creature Death Touch and Lifelink. The Death Touch, we've seen why that's so good with the Bow of Nylea. Lifelink, in this deck, we're going to be taking damage. It's just a fact of the matter. When we're attacking, other people are going to attack us. And every time our commander does damage, assuming this is on our commander, whether it's in the form of combat damage or in the form of their direct damage from their trigger, we're going to be able to gain life. Pretty good. If we wanted to put this on a Brash Taunter or a Stuffy Doll, and we have some damage doublers in play, that can also be quite good for us, because we're going to be able to do a lot more damage with that doubling, thanks to, or do a lot more damage with the doubling, and therefore gain more life thanks to the lifelink. We've seen Doppelgang, and how it synergizes because it can make, well, copies of everything, but specifically give us a lot more lands that we can use that mana for, and use the original lands to either put into our graveyard or back in our hand and reuse them with our commander. Horizon Explorer and Splunking, of course, make our mini gates that we have come in untapped, and our other tap lands. Slowgurk, obviously, can bring lands back from our graveyard to our hand, and synergizes because we're going to be putting lands in our graveyard anyway to put counters on them. And like I mentioned before, Lurking Predators may let us power our commander back out if we tuck them in our library rather than having to pay the commander tax. So that covers all of our spells. I want to go now, as usual, to talk about our lands. We are running a lot more green than blue or red, a little bit more red than blue. So we've got these 13 basic lands, which is a little bit tight on basics, especially since we're running 40 lands. But a lot of our cards that can pull basics out of or pull cards out of our deck can hit gates instead of our basics. So sometimes we want to get a basic, but as much as we can, we usually want to try and get a gate for ourselves. In any case, this could be a little bit more even if we wanted it to, but I found that making sure we can always hit our multiple pips of green is usually better. So that's why we've got our split this way. We're running 4 bounce lands. Bounce lands work like this. These are lands that come in tapped, and when they do, we return a land that we control to its owner's hand, to our hand. That's why we call it a bounce land, because it comes in and bounces a land. It, however, taps for 2 mana. So this is really good in most commander decks that aren't super, like, crazy competitively fast, because not only do they make sure that we hit our land drop and we haven't lost anything out on it because we've returned this land because it is making mana for itself and sort of the land we bounced, but it puts that land in our hand so we make our land drop next turn. So we have, over the course of 3 turns, played a land, played a bounce land, bounced the original land, 3rd turn, play the original land again, and we've only got 2 lands in play, but we've hit our land drop every turn and we've still got 3 mana available to us. These are great because it lets us put lands back in our hand and therefore discard them to our commander if we want to. Gruul Turf makes red and green, Is It Boilerworks makes blue and red, Simic Growth Chamber makes green and blue, and Guildless Commons makes double colorless. It's not a gate. I wish it were. Guildless, Ravnica, just saying. We have these 4 fixing lands. Command Tower, of course, is going to be in our deck because we have at least 1 color in our commander's color identity. So it's an untapped land that taps just like Arcane Signet, making either blue or red or green for us. Echoing Deeps is one of our caves. It is a land that enters either untapped and taps for colorless, or we can have it enter tapped as a copy of any land in our graveyard, except it's a cave in addition to its other types. So we could have this come in as a bounce land that's in our graveyard, or as one of our gates if we've thrown the gate away already to our commander's trigger. Then we can maybe get that gate back later, but we don't have to wait for it because it's come in tapped as a copy of that. And at that point, it will not tap if you have it come in as a copy for colorless. It'll tap for whatever that land it's copying can tap for. The only difference is it's also a cave. Exotic Orchard, I know some people run this in other decks. Any deck I'm making that has at least 3 colors in the commander's color identity, I like to run Exotic Orchard. It taps for 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce. So the likelihood that this taps for at least 2 of our colors is pretty good. Temple of the False God, I know some people don't like this, but I think it's perfect for the decks that I build. It is a land that taps for 2 colorless mana, except that we cannot tap it at all unless we control at least 4 other lands. So 5 or more, but it counts itself. So this is a soul land. It's a soul ring. We just can't use it very early in the game unless we've powered out many more lands. Which in this deck might happen, but even if it doesn't, an untapped land that taps for 2, I mean, that's Guildless Commons, but not as a bounce land. It's pretty good. Next is our gates section, which is really where we want to come to see how things work. So we just want to get, with Maze's End, 9 or 10 of these in play so that we can try and win the game with them. Many of them work like Cliffgate. Cliffgate is a tap land that enters, and we choose a color other than the color it taps for, and it taps for that color we chose, or one we've specified, or that it was already specified rather. So Cliffgate could come in, and when it is untapped, it'll tap for red, or we will choose either green or blue, and it taps for red or green, or red or blue. We'll see more of those as we go, just like we'll see these guild gates. Gruul Guild Gate is a gate. It comes in tapped, and it taps for red or green. That's it. Also, the best art for the Gruul Guild Gate. So those are the sort of mana fixing style gates that we care about the most. The guild gates and the gates that are sort of thriving lands. But I'm going to go through them in order now to show you all the other things. Baldur's Gate, a classic, very powerful gate card that is legendary. It taps for colorless, comes in untapped, or we can pay 2, tap, and add an amount of mana in any one color equal to the number of other gates we control. So if we have 3 other gates, we can pay 2 and tap Baldur's Gate to make 3 mana, which is sort of the point we want to be at for that, because then we can tap our other gates and make even more. So yeah, Baldur's Gate doesn't give us an enormous amount of mana every time we activate it, but once we have enough gates, it'll go off. Basilisk Gate is untapped, taps for colorless, or we can pay 2 and tap it to give one of our creatures +X/+X, where X is the number of gates we control, but only as a sorcery. So pretty nice, a nice little bonus. One of the big reasons we have gates like this in here is because it's a gate that has a different name. So it gives us a better chance of getting Maze's End off. We've seen Cliffgate. Now we have Gateway Plaza from War of the Spark. It is a gate that enters tapped, and when it enters, we have to sacrifice it unless we pay a generic mana. So it's sort of like a bounce land in this way. It doesn't put a land back in our hand, but it does require us to lose a land in the form of having to use that land to tap for mana so that we don't sacrifice Gateway Plaza. But after that, it is a gate, and it taps for 1 mana of any color, so good fixing for us. Gond Gate is next. Gond Gate is a little bit for our gates like Splunking, because it says gates we control enter untapped. Pretty sweet. Gond Gate also enters untapped, of course. It taps for colorless, or we can tap it for 1 mana of any color that a gate we control could produce. Pretty good. Gruul Guild Gate, we've seen. Enters tapped, taps for red or green. Heap Gate enters untapped, taps for colorless, or we can filter a mana through it by paying 1 and tapping for 1 mana of any color. But we can also pay 1 and tap it, and tap an untapped gate we control to make a treasure token. So this is a way, if we don't have spells that we really want to cast, and we have an extra gate in play, we can tap it and Heap Gate and 1 more mana to make a treasure, and we've sort of banked our mana from those lands for later. Izzet Guild Gate is the same as Gruul Guild Gate in that it comes in tapped, is a gate, but it taps for blue and red. Manor Gate is the same as Cliffgate in that it is a gate, comes in tapped. We choose a color other than green when it comes in, and it taps for green and that color. We've seen Maze's End, of course. Plaza of Harmony is our other land in this section that is not itself a gate, but cares about gates. So this is a land that comes in untapped and says when it enters, if we control 2 or more gates, we gain 3 life. So a nice little bonus. It also taps for colorless, or 1 mana of any type that a gate we control could produce. So it's the same as Gond Gate in that way. Very nice. It's like an honorary gate. Sea Gate is the same as Manor Gate and Cliff Gate, except it's the blue version. Choose a color other than blue, comes in tapped, is a gate, taps for blue and that chosen color. And Simmet Guild Gate is the same as our Gruul and Izzet Guild Gates, but it taps for green or blue. Finally, we're running Thran Portal. I don't think Thran Portal is a good card, but it is a gate, and it's not horrible. It's kind of horrible, but it's a gate, and so we got to run some gates sometimes. Thran Portal enters tapped unless we control 2 or fewer other lands. So if we have a lot of lands, it's going to come in tapped. And then as it enters, we choose a basic land type. So we'll choose either forest, mountain, or island. This land is the chosen type in addition to its other types. So it will be like a forest gate or a mountain gate. one of those. Unfortunately, mana abilities of this land cost an additional 1 life to activate. That means every time we tap this for mana of the abilities it has, which it gains when it gains a basic type, it's a pain land. It costs us 1 mana. We can't even tap this for colorless because it doesn't have the ability to do that, like a regular pain land would. So, not the best land for us to be able to have. It is worth noticing that if we were to use Heapgate, Heapgate asks us to pay a mana, tap it, and tap an untapped gate we control. We can then tap Thran Portal as that untapped gate we control, and we're not activating a mana ability of Thran Portal, so we don't have to pay any life. So we can still use it that way. After our gates, we are running Frontier Bivouac. It's the tri-land. It enters tapped and taps for 1 mana of any of the colors in our commander's color identity. So it's like a tapped command tower. Pretty good for us. Finally, we're running these 4 utility lands. I like to run Demolition Field because sometimes an opponent has a non-basic land that's really just a problem for us. So this taps for colorless, comes untapped, comes in untapped. And if we pay 2, tap, and sack it, we can destroy a non-basic land that our opponent controls. But then they get to go find a basic and put it on the battlefield untapped and shuffle. And so do we. So neither of us, our opponent or ourselves, are down a land. We both have a basic, they're both untapped. It's great. We've just gotten rid of their Maze of Ith or the Rogue's Passage, whatever may be dangerous. We have a Kessig Wolf Run. It comes in untapped, it taps for colorless, or we can pay X, a red and a green, and tap it to give a creature +X+O and trample until end of turn. This is in here so that we can win with commander damage. We can sneak in either before combat or after blockers, before damage, and just pump up our commander and give them trample, which may be relevant, but more importantly, give them a lot more damage on the front end so that we can maybe win with our commander damage. It doesn't have to be our commander that uses this, but like a Gate Colossus would really benefit from this, but yeah, that's why it's here. We got Rogue's Passage for a similar reason. It can tap for colorless, of course comes in untapped, and we can pay 4, tap, to make a creature we control unblockable this turn. Actually, it's not a creature we control, it's just any creature. So we can also use this in the same way I was describing before, politically. Hey, you really need to get in to kill your opponent, or you really want to get an attack trigger on someone, but we're not really willing to let you attack us, but we'll let you attack someone else unblockably if you leave us alone for the next turn, or if you give us a benefit of some sort. So Rogue's Passage, mostly for our commander, but also good for our other creatures and maybe political. Finally, we have our other cave card. It's Urza's Cave. It's a land. The types are Urza's Cave. It comes in untapped and it taps for colorless, but it also says if we pay 3 and tap and sack it, we can search our library for any land card and put it onto the battlefield tapped and then shuffle. So Urza's Cave is not ramp because we're losing it in order to get a different land, but it does fix our mana. It does give us whatever particular card we may need. This lets us find our Maze's End if we need to, and it requires us to sacrifice Urza's Cave. We have several ways to recur cards from our graveyard, recur lands, either back to our hand or straight to the battlefield, and we can use Urza's Cave multiple times in the same turn, or the same game. Maybe the same turn if we have it, come in untapped thanks to something, and we get to use it again. It's possible. But in any case, this is a great backup for us to find Maze's End if we haven't found it some other way. And that will do it. Remember, again, I will be making a deck for each of the March of the Machine legends, so make sure you let me know in the comments if you'd like to see me build a specific commander or a specific deck style. And thanks for watching, everyone. Remember to like and subscribe, and remember most of all that magic is fun. You should play more Magic.